To the world, 1600, Pennsylvania Avenue is an elegant 18th century executive mansion. But beneath its historic floorboards lies one of the most heavily fortified, secretive subterranean fortresses on the planet. Deep below the east and west wings sits a sprawling network of blast-proof command centers, highly classified tunnel complexes, and multi-story bunkers designed to withstand nuclear detonations, biological threats, and direct assaults. In 2025, the entire East Wing was torn to rubble, and in its place a new military complex is rising in near total secrecy, massed beneath the foundations of a 900,000 square foot ballroom. This isn't just a home for the president. It is a self-sustaining underground command post built to survive the end of the world. The story begins in the winter of 1941, weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's advisors were gripped by a genuine fear that Washington itself could become a target of enemy bombers. The White House, a symbol of American power sitting exposed above ground, suddenly looked like a liability. So, under total secrecy, engineers began carving out a bomb shelter beneath the East Wing. According to historians, there was no public acknowledgement that a shelter was even being built. Workers poured thick concrete walls and lined the ceilings with steel sheathing. Inside, they built a small presidential bedroom, a bathroom, storage for gas masks, food rations, and early communications equipment. This was the birth of what would eventually be called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or the POC. For decades, the POC sat quietly beneath the East Wing, upgraded periodically but rarely discussed. It was designed as a short-term crisis shelter, not a permanent command post. The idea was simple. If Washington ever came under direct attack, the president and his closest staff needed somewhere to survive the first critical hours. Unlike the more famous Situation Room in the West Wing, which operates as a constant information hub feeding intelligence to staff around the clock, the POC was built for one purpose only: survival during the worst-case scenario. It was rarely used, rarely spoken of, and by design, almost entirely unknown to the American public. Over the years, small details leaked out. Visitors described a labyrinth of narrow hallways beneath the East Wing, heavy steel doors, an atmosphere that felt more like the interior of a submarine than a section of a presidential residence. One source who had toured the space described it exactly that way, calling it a complicated, self-contained unit from the 1940s. With its own separate backups for power, water, and air filtration. For 60 years, this was the extent of what the public understood about the bunker under the East Wing. Then came September 11, 2001, and the POC stopped being a footnote in history. It became the nerve center of the United States government during its most dangerous hour since Pearl Harbor. On the morning of September 11th, President George W. Bush was in Florida, which meant the immediate chain of command inside the White House fell to Vice President Dick Cheney. As the scale of the attacks became clear, Secret Service agents moved quickly to get Cheney underground. Witnesses described being physically hustled through heavy steel doors that sealed shut with a loud hiss, forming an airtight barrier between the shelter and the world above. Behind those doors was the POC, suddenly transformed from a rarely used relic into the operational heart of the federal government. Inside, secure communications desks connected Cheney to military leadership, intelligence agencies, and the president himself. According to the 9/11 Commission report, it was from inside that shelter's conference room that Cheney authorized fighter jets to engage United Airlines Flight 93 if necessary, one of the most consequential decisions made that day. The POC became a live command post in real time, coordinating the evacuation of federal buildings, tracking the whereabouts of hijacked aircraft, and managing communications with a country in chaos above ground. For a facility built 60 years earlier as a last resort shelter, it performed exactly the role its World War II-era designers had imagined, a hardened space where continuity of government could survive a direct assault on the Capitol. The peoc's role that day cemented its place in American history, but also exposed how little the public actually knew about the space. Reporters and historians spent years afterward trying to piece together details of what the bunker actually looked like, how it functioned, and what upgrades have been made since Roosevelt's era. Former Secret Service officials have since noted that the POC works differently from the Situation Room. The Situation Room is used constantly, a hub feeding information to staff 24 hours a day. The POC, by contrast, is only activated during genuine emergencies, a hardened command post reserved for the worst days in American history. After September 11th, it became clear that a World War II-era shelter built for aerial bombing raids was no longer sufficient for a 21st century world of terrorism, cyber attacks, and asymmetric threats. That realization set the stage for a much larger, much more secretive expansion. In the years following 9/11, government planners quietly began one of the most expensive and least publicized construction projects at the White House complex, a major excavation beneath the West Wing and North Lawn. Officially described in budget documents as infrastructure modernization, the project involved removing enormous quantities of earth to build deeper, more resilient facilities beneath the working areas of the executive branch. The scale of the operation was almost impossible to hide completely. For months, area residents and Washington Press Corps members noted heavy machinery and prolonged construction activity on the North Lawn, an area not normally associated with major groundwork. The project reportedly ran well beyond $100 million, with some estimates placing the true cost in the hundreds of millions once secure technology and reinforced construction materials were factored in. Unlike a typical renovation, the work included pouring reinforced concrete designed to withstand significant impact forces, installing new secure communications infrastructure, and expanding underground square footage well beyond what previously existed under the West Wing. Because much of the interior work was classified, the public was told very little about what these new spaces actually contained. What is known is that the project marked a turning point, an acknowledgement by the federal government that the aging World War II-era shelter system was no longer adequate for modern threats. This excavation set an important precedent. It proved that the government was willing to spend enormous, difficult-to-itemize sums, disguised within broader infrastructure or renovation budgets, to expand the hardened underground footprint of the White House complex. It also established a model that would define the far larger project happening today: construction justified publicly as a renovation or infrastructure upgrade, while the truly sensitive work took place underground and out of view. When journalists later asked about the details of the North Lawn project, officials repeatedly declined to elaborate, citing national security. That pattern of official silence around underground construction at the White House would repeat itself again on a much larger scale, roughly 15 years later. In October 2025, demolition crews began tearing down the east wing of the White House entirely. Officially, the project was framed as clearing space for a grand new ballroom, a 900,000 square foot addition intended for state dinners and large public events, with a price tag that has been reported at anywhere from $300 to $400 million. But as excavators reduced the historic East Colonnade to rubble, they also tore out something far more significant: the decades-old Presidential Emergency Operations Center itself. According to sources who spoke with CNN, the legacy peoc, along with its associated heating, air, and utility infrastructure, appears to have been completely destroyed during demolition. What is replacing it is, by the administration's own description in federal court filings, a massive underground military complex. Those filings, submitted as part of a lawsuit brought by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, describe protective missile-resistant steel columns and beams, drone-proof roofing materials, and bullet, ballistic, and blast-proof glass. The same filings reference bomb shelters, hospital and medical facilities, protective partitioning, and what are described only as top-secret military installations, structures, and equipment. President Trump has personally confirmed elements of the project, telling reporters that the military is building what he called a massive complex underneath the ballroom, and describing the ballroom itself as essentially a shed covering the far more significant construction happening beneath it. The scale of this rebuild dwarfs anything attempted since Roosevelt's original 1942 shelter. Where the old peoc was a single hardened basement level, reporting indicates the new complex extends multiple stories below ground, incorporating modern reinforced construction techniques that didn't exist when the West Wing bunker was expanded in the 2000s. The architect brought on to lead the design, Shalom Barons, previously worked on hardening the Pentagon after September 11th, designing secure compartmented facilities and blast-resistant infrastructure, along with later work on the Department of Homeland Security headquarters. His background is in classified security architecture, not ceremonial design, a detail that speaks volumes about the true purpose of what's being built underneath a building the public has been told is simply a ballroom. Court filings and public statements from administration officials have offered rare, if incomplete, glimpses into what specific systems are being built into this new underground complex. Trump himself has told reporters that the facility will include a hospital and what he called very major medical facilities. This marks a significant departure from decades of established protocol, under which presidential medical emergencies have historically been handled by the White House medical unit on site, with the president never more than a short trip from a Level 1 trauma center, and Air Force One equipped with its own surgical suite. Building a dedicated underground hospital suggests planning for a scenario in which the president cannot leave the building at all, not for hours, but for an extended period of time. Beyond medical infrastructure, filings reference dedicated research facilities and secure communication bunkers integrated into the new substructure. Officials have spoken of biological and drone-related threats specifically, with Trump describing the ballroom structure above as protection against drones and, in his words, any other thing. While the precise technical specifications of the air filtration and defense systems remain classified, the language used by officials and in court documents echoes the same priorities that shaped Cold War-era continuity of government planning. Systems designed to keep senior leadership functioning and protected during biological, chemical, or nuclear emergencies for an extended and indefinite period, fully sealed off from the surface. White House officials have been notably resistant to disclosing further details. At a National Capital Planning Commission meeting, the White House's Director of Management and Administration was directly pressed on why demolition began before the commission had approved the project. His response was that certain aspects of the work were, in his words, frankly of a top-secret nature. The Secret Service has echoed this position in court, arguing that pausing underground construction would hamper its ability to meet its statutory protective obligations, and offering to share additional classified detail with the presiding judge privately rather than in open court. This pattern, official acknowledgement that something significant and secretive is happening, paired with a refusal to specify exactly what, has defined public understanding of this project since its earliest days. Long before the current construction began, Washington had circulated persistent stories about a network of tunnels connecting the White House to other secure government sites nearby, including the Treasury building next door and other federal facilities within the security perimeter. Some of this is a matter of public record. Historical accounts confirm a tunnel connecting the White House to the Treasury building has existed for decades, originally built for security and continuity purposes. Beyond that specific documented connection, much of what's discussed about broader tunnel networks around the complex remains speculative, based on decades of rumor, historical anecdotes, and occasional oblique comment from former officials, rather than confirmed government disclosure. What is confirmed is the philosophy behind these systems. Redundancy, continuity of government planning has, since the Cold War, emphasized multiple secure paths of movement and multiple hardened locations, precisely so that no single point of failure could sever the president's ability to govern during a crisis. Whether the current East Wing project expands or modernizes any existing tunnel connections is not publicly known, and officials have not addressed the question directly. Given the scale of the excavation work already reported around the North Lawn and West Wing over the past 2 decades, combined with a far larger project now underway beneath the ballroom, it is reasonable to assume the underground footprint of the complex, in whatever form it takes, is more extensive than anything the public has previously been shown. What we do know for certain is that the Secret Service has taken an unusually central and forceful role in this dispute, going so far as to argue in federal court that halting underground construction would directly endanger national security and impair the agency's statutory protective mission. That level of legal urgency from the agency responsible for physically protecting the president underscores just how significant officials consider this infrastructure to be, even if the specifics of tunnels, secure corridors, and connecting passageways remain, by design, outside public view. What emerges from years of piecing together fragments, court filings, official comments, and decades of institutional history is a picture of a presidential complex evolving in real time from a historic residence into something closer to a hardened command post. Above ground, the new ballroom is being built with materials described in court documents as missile-resistant steel, drone-proof roofing, and bullet and blast-resistant glass. Below it, officials have confirmed the construction of bomb shelters, medical facilities, and what they repeatedly refuse to detail beyond the phrase top secret military installations. This is a fundamental transformation from the emergency shelter Roosevelt ordered built in 1942. That original POC was designed for one narrow purpose: surviving the first hours of an aerial attack. What's being built today, according to the government's own description in federal court, is something built to endure biological threats, missile strikes, and drone attacks, potentially for an extended period, not just hours. Whether that shift represents prudent modernization in an era of new threats, or a far more significant expansion of executive branch infrastructure than has ever been publicly disclosed, is now a genuine point of legal and political contention, playing out in federal court as preservation groups fight to force transparency the administration has so far resisted. What is certain is this: beneath the marble columns and manicured lawns that generations of Americans have watched on television, a structure is rising that few people will ever see and fewer will ever fully understand. 60 years from now, historians may look back on this moment the same way we look back on 1942, the quiet, unannounced beginning of the next chapter in how American presidents prepare not just to lead the country, but to survive it.